The emergency klaxon shrieked across Peterson Air Force Base as Captain Elena Rodriguez gripped the controls of a dying B-52 Stratofortress. 8 engines silent, hydraulics failing, and visibility zero in the worst blizzard Colorado had seen in decades. The massive bomber was falling from the sky like a wounded bird, carrying 6 souls and enough fuel to level half the base if she got this wrong. But 12 years earlier, nobody would have bet $1 on Elena Rodriguez ever touching the controls of a military aircraft. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. In fact, they'd kicked her out of flight school for being too cautious, too methodical, too slow. They called her a safety risk and sent her packing with a recommendation that she consider a career in air traffic control instead. Sometimes the people who seem least likely to succeed are exactly the ones who end up saving everyone else. Elena Rodriguez had dreamed of flying since she was 7 years old, watching her grandfather restore a 1947 Cessna 140 in his garage in Albuquerque. While other kids played video games, Elena memorized aircraft manuals. While her classmates worried about fashion and social media, she studied weather patterns and aerodynamic principles. By the time she graduated high school, she could identify any aircraft by the sound of its engines and predict weather changes by watching cloud formations. Her acceptance letter to Randolph Air Force Base flight training arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, accompanied by her grandfather's blessing and her mother's worried tears. Elena packed her single suitcase with military precision, including the leather flight journal her grandfather had given her for her 18th birthday. Inside the front cover, he'd written in his careful handwriting, "Flying isn't about speed, Mia. It's about understanding." Randolph Air Force Base sprawled across the Texas landscape like a small city dedicated entirely to the art of military aviation, home to the 12th Flying Training Wing. It was where the Air Force's future pilots learned to push multi-million-dollar aircraft to their absolute limits. The base processed over 1,200 pilot candidates annually, and only 60% would earn their wings. Elena's arrival coincided with the beginning of undergraduate pilot training, the most intensive 11 months of aviation education in the world. She joined 47 other candidates, a mix of fresh-faced college graduates and prior enlisted airmen, who'd earned their shot at the cockpit through years of ground service. The group represented the cream of American aviation aptitude, each candidate having survived multiple screening processes, psychological evaluations, and physical tests that eliminated thousands of hopefuls. Their first instructor was Major Patricia Chun, AF-16 pilot with over 2,000 combat hours and a reputation for producing either exceptional pilots or washouts with no middle ground. Major Chun stood before the assembled candidates in classroom Alpha, her flight suit crisp and her expression unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Major Chun began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd guided supersonic aircraft through hostile airspace. "You are here because the United States Air Force believes you have the potential to become military aviators. That belief, however, is provisional. Over the next 11 months, we will test every assumption about your abilities, your judgment, and your character." She clicked a remote, and the classroom's large screen displayed statistics that made several candidates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Historical washout rate, 40%. Most common reasons for elimination: spatial disorientation, inability to manage task saturation, and failure to make rapid decisions under pressure. The modern battlefield demands pilots who can process information instantaneously and execute split-second maneuvers that mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Elena listened carefully, taking notes in her leather journal while most other candidates focused on the digital tablets they'd been issued. Her handwriting was small and precise, recording not just Major Chun's words, but her observations about the other candidates' reactions. She noticed how Lieutenant Jake Morrison, a former Air Force Academy football player, leaned forward aggressively during discussions of aerial combat. She observed that Captain Lisa Park, a prior enlisted avionics technician, asked detailed questions about aircraft systems that demonstrated deep technical knowledge. But what Elena noticed most was the emphasis on speed. Every aspect of the program seemed designed to accelerate decision-making, compress reaction times, and eliminate the natural human tendency toward careful consideration. The training philosophy was built around the assumption that fast decisions were inherently better than slow ones, that hesitation in the cockpit was a potentially fatal flaw. Their first simulator session took place in Building 315, a facility housing 12 T-6 Texan II simulators that replicated every aspect of flying the Air Force's primary trainer aircraft. The simulators were technological marvels, complete with wraparound visual systems, authentic cockpit instrumentation, and motion platforms that recreated the physical sensations of flight. Elena's assigned simulator was Station 7, positioned between Jake Morrison and another candidate named Rachel Williams, a former airline pilot who'd given up a lucrative civilian career to serve her country. As they strapped into their seats and began pre-flight procedures, Elena methodically worked through each checklist item, verifying every switch position and gauge reading. Rodriguez called instructor pilot Captain David Kumar from his observation station. "You're falling behind. Pick up the pace." Elena acknowledged the instruction but continued her systematic approach. While other candidates rushed through their checklists, she took the time to understand why each step mattered, how each system interconnected with the others, and what warning signs might indicate developing problems. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Understanding was more important than speed. The first flight scenario was relatively simple: takeoff, basic maneuvers, and landing under ideal weather conditions. Elena's approach was textbook perfect, her inputs smooth and deliberate, her altitude and airspeed control precise within the narrowest tolerances. But she was slow. While Jake Morrison completed the exercise in 12 minutes, Elena took 18. Rodriguez, Captain Kumar announced after reviewing the performance data, "Your technical execution is flawless, but your decision-making speed needs significant improvement." In combat, those extra 6 minutes could mean the difference between completing your mission and becoming a casualty. Elena nodded respectfully, but privately wondered if anyone had considered what might happen if those rapid decisions were wrong. Her methodical approach had identified 3 potential system irregularities that faster pilots had missed: a slight fluctuation in oil pressure that could indicate developing engine problems, a navigation system drift that might affect mission accuracy, and a barely perceptible vibration in the control stick that suggested possible control surface damage. The pattern continued through their second week of training. Elena consistently demonstrated superior aircraft handling skills, better systems knowledge, and more accurate navigation than her peers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But she was always the last to complete exercises, the slowest to respond to emergency scenarios, and the most likely to request additional information before making decisions. During ground school sessions, Elena's comprehensive understanding of aircraft systems impressed even veteran instructors. She could explain the intricate relationships between hydraulic pressure, electrical load, and engine performance in ways that helped other candidates grasp complex concepts. Her test scores consistently ranked in the top 5% of her class, but the flying evaluations told a different story. Rodriguez demonstrates excellent stick and rudder skills and comprehensive systems knowledge. Read her first formal evaluation, written by Captain Kumar. However, her response times during emergency procedures fall significantly below acceptable standards. Recommend increased emphasis on rapid decision-making exercises to address hesitation, tendencies that could prove problematic in operational environments. Elena read the evaluation in the privacy of her dormitory room, her grandfather's flight journal open beside her. She'd been documenting every aspect of her training experience, recording not just her own progress, but her observations about the program's underlying assumptions. The Air Force clearly valued speed above all other considerations, but Elena wondered if they were optimizing for the wrong variable. Her roommate, Second Lieutenant Amy Foster, a bubbly communications major from Ohio, tried to offer encouragement. "Don't let it get to you, Elena. You're obviously a gifted pilot. Maybe you just need to trust your instincts more instead of overthinking everything." Elena appreciated Amy's support, but the advice missed the fundamental issue. Elena wasn't overthinking. She was thinking comprehensively. Her grandfather had taught her that thorough analysis prevented problems, rather than simply reacting to them after they occurred. The military's emphasis on rapid response seemed to assume that problems would always announce themselves clearly and provide obvious solutions. But Elena's experience with her grandfather's aircraft restoration had taught her that mechanical systems were complex, interconnected, and prone to subtle failures that only revealed themselves to careful observation. She'd watched him diagnose engine problems by listening to tiny changes in rhythm that most people couldn't even hear. She'd learned to spot stress fractures in metal components that looked perfectly normal to casual inspection. The third week brought their introduction to formation flying, one of the most challenging aspects of military aviation. Flying in close proximity to other aircraft required precise control, constant communication, and absolute trust in both your own abilities and those of your wingmen. The training began in simulators before progressing to actual flight operations. Elena found herself paired with Jake Morrison for initial formation exercises. Jake's aggressive flying style and competitive nature made him a challenging partner for someone who preferred careful, methodical approaches to aviation. During their first simulated formation flight, Jake consistently pressured Elena to maintain closer spacing and execute more aggressive maneuvers. "Come on, Rodriguez," Jake transmitted over the inter-aircraft radio. "Close it up. You're flying like my grandmother." Elena maintained her position precisely 2 aircraft lengths behind and slightly to Jake's right, exactly as specified in the training manual. Her spacing was stable, her altitude control precise, and her position relative to Jake's aircraft constant. But Jake wanted to fly the kind of tight formation he'd seen in airshow demonstrations, with wingtip separation measured in feet rather than aircraft lengths. "Negative, Morrison," Elena replied calmly. "Maintaining standard training formation spacing per published procedures." Their instructor pilot, Captain Sarah Mitchell, observed the exchange from her own aircraft while monitoring both students' performance. Elena's formation flying was textbook perfect, demonstrating the kind of smooth, predictable control that made her a reliable wingman. Jake's flying was more dynamic and aggressive, with tighter spacing that looked impressive but violated several safety protocols. After the flight, Captain Mitchell debriefed both students in the squadron-ready room. "Morrison, your formation flying shows good instinctive feel for aircraft control, but you need to adhere to established procedures. Rodriguez, your technical execution is excellent, but you need to demonstrate more confidence and assertiveness." Elena listened to the feedback with growing confusion. She'd flown exactly according to the training manual, maintained perfect position relative to her lead aircraft, and demonstrated the kind of predictable flying that made formation work safely. But somehow her adherence to established procedures was being characterized as lack of confidence. That evening, Elena sat in the base library reviewing formation flying manuals and historical accident reports. What she discovered reinforced her belief in careful, methodical approaches to aviation. The majority of formation flying accidents resulted from aggressive maneuvering, inadequate spacing, or attempts to exceed established safety parameters. The pilots who died in these accidents weren't incompetent. They were often highly skilled. Aviators who'd been encouraged to push boundaries and demonstrate aggressive confidence. Elena documented her findings in her flight journal, noting the disconnect between the safety data and the training philosophy being promoted at Randolph. The emphasis on aggressive flying and rapid decision-making seemed to contradict decades of accident investigation findings that consistently identified haste and overconfidence as primary contributing factors to aviation mishaps. The fourth week brought instrument flying training, where pilots learned to control aircraft using only cockpit instruments without reference to outside visual cues. This phase of training was particularly challenging because it required absolute trust in instrument indications even when they contradicted natural sensory inputs. Many pilot candidates struggled with the disorientation that resulted from flying in clouds or at night when visual references were unavailable. Elena excelled at instrument flying from her first lesson. Her methodical approach to cross-checking instruments, her systematic scan patterns, and her careful verification of navigation data made her exceptionally proficient at maintaining aircraft control without outside visual references. While other candidates fought spatial disorientation and struggled to maintain heading and altitude, Elena's instrument scans were textbook perfect. But once again, her careful approach was characterized as excessive caution. Rodriguez observed Major Chun during a particularly challenging instrument approach exercise. "Your instrument cross-check is excellent, but you're taking too long to process the information. In actual instrument conditions, you need to make faster decisions based on available data." Elena had successfully completed a precision instrument approach in challenging simulated weather conditions, maintaining the aircraft within narrow altitude and course tolerances throughout the entire procedure. Her approach was smooth, stable, and precise, but she'd taken 30 seconds longer than the target time because she'd carefully verified her navigation data and cross-checked multiple instruments before making course corrections. During the debrief, Major Chun emphasized the importance of rapid decision-making in instrument conditions. In actual weather, you don't have the luxury of extended analysis. You need to trust your instruments, make quick decisions, and execute promptly. Hesitation in instrument conditions can be fatal. Elena understood the logic but questioned the assumption. Her grandfather had taught her that instrument flying required patience and systematic thinking, not rush decisions. He'd shown her ACCID-ENT reports where experienced pilots had made rapid decisions based on incomplete information, resulting in controlled flight into terrain or loss of aircraft control. That weekend, Elena called her grandfather from the base payphone, needing to hear his perspective on the training philosophy she was encountering. "Mia," her grandfather said after listening to her concerns, "there are two kinds of pilots, those who fly fast and those who fly long. The military needs both kinds, but they often don't recognize the value of careful pilots until something goes wrong." He paused, and Elena could hear him thinking carefully about his words. "Your grandmother used to worry about my flying because she thought I was too cautious. But caution isn't the opposite of courage. It's the foundation of competence. Keep flying your way, Elena. The world needs pilots who think before they act." The conversation gave Elena confidence to maintain her methodical approach despite the continued pressure to fly more aggressively. She continued documenting her observations in her flight journal, recording not just her own experiences, but patterns she noticed in other candidates' training progression. Several students had already been eliminated from the program, including two who'd been praised for their aggressive flying styles, but had failed to maintain aircraft control during challenging exercises. Elena noticed that the students who consistently performed well were those who balanced assertiveness with careful judgment, not those who simply flew fast. But the training cadre seemed increasingly concerned about Elena's deliberate approach to aviation. Her flight evaluations consistently noted her exceptional technical skills while criticizing her decision-making speed. The pattern suggested that her methodical flying style was being viewed as a fundamental character flaw rather than an alternative approach to aviation safety. The turning point came during her 6th week of training, during a complex multi-engine emergency simulation that would determine her continuation in the pilot training program. The scenario involved multiple system failures requiring rapid diagnosis and immediate corrective action. Elena's response was technically perfect but methodically slow, exactly the kind of performance that had characterized her entire training experience. As she shut down the simulator and removed her helmet, Elena noticed Major Chun and Captain Kumar engaged in an intense discussion at the instructor station. Their body language suggested disagreement, and she caught fragments of their conversation that included phrases like safety risk and inappropriate temperament for military aviation. That evening, Elena was summoned to Major Chun's office for what she assumed would be a routine progress review. Instead, she found herself facing a formal evaluation board consisting of Major Chun, Captain Kumar, and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hayes, the squadron commander. The atmosphere was formal and serious, suggesting that this meeting would determine her future in the Air Force. Cadet Rodriguez, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes began, consulting a thick folder of training records. You've completed 6 weeks of undergraduate pilot training with mixed results. Your technical proficiency is excellent, your systems knowledge is comprehensive, and your aircraft handling skills are above average. However, your decision-making speed consistently falls below acceptable standards for military aviation. Elena listened carefully, maintaining the respectful posture she'd been taught, but feeling a growing sense of dread about where this conversation was heading. The modern battlefield requires pilots who can make split-second decisions under extreme pressure. Major Chun continued. Hesitation in combat situations directly translates to mission failure and potential loss of life. While your careful approach might be appropriate in civilian aviation, it represents a fundamental mismatch with military requirements. Captain Kumar added his perspective, referencing specific examples from Elena's training record. During formation exercises, you consistently maintained excessive spacing that would be inappropriate in tactical situations. During instrument approaches, you took significantly longer than acceptable to process information and execute maneuvers. These patterns suggest an inability to adapt to the rapid decision-making requirements of military aviation. Elena felt compelled to defend her approach, though she understood that challenging the evaluation board's assessment would likely seal her fate. Sir, my understanding is that aviation safety depends on thorough analysis and systematic decision-making. I've consistently completed all exercises successfully within established safety parameters. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes nodded acknowledgement, but maintained his serious expression. Cadet Rodriguez, we're not questioning your ability to fly safely under normal conditions. We're questioning your ability to operate effectively in the high-tempo, high-stress environment of military operations. The luxury of extended analysis simply doesn't exist in combat. The evaluation board's decision was presented as a formal recommendation rather than an immediate elimination, but Elena understood that her future at Randolph Air Force Base was effectively over. She would be transferred to a different career field within the Air Force, one that would utilize her technical skills while acknowledging her inappropriate temperament for military aviation. Major Chun's closing comments were delivered with what seemed like genuine regret. Rodriguez, you have the potential to be an excellent pilot in the right environment. Unfortunately, that environment isn't military aviation. We're recommending your transfer to air traffic control, where your methodical approach and attention to detail will be valuable assets. Elena accepted the evaluation board's decision with military bearing, thanking them for their consideration and expressing her continued commitment to serving her. country in whatever capacity the Air Force deemed appropriate. But privately, she felt like she was being punished for caring too much about safety, for thinking too carefully about the consequences of her actions. That night, she sat in her dormitory room, writing the most difficult entry in her flight journal. Today I learned that the military values speed over safety, aggression over analysis, and confidence over competence. I've been eliminated from pilot training not because I can't fly, but because I won't fly carelessly. Amy Foster tried to console her roommate, offering to help Elena prepare for her new assignment in air traffic control. But Elena wasn't ready for consolation. She was angry, disappointed, and convinced that the Air Force was making a fundamental mistake about what made pilots truly valuable. Her elimination from pilot training became official 3 days later, accompanied by orders assigning her to the 342nd Training Squadron at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi for air traffic control training. Elena packed her belongings methodically, including her grandfather's flight journal, now filled with observations about a training system that seemed designed to eliminate exactly the kind of careful thinking that prevented accidents. As her departure shuttle pulled away from Randolph Air Force Base, Elena looked back at the flight line where T-6 trainers continued their endless pattern of takeoffs and landings. Somewhere among those aircraft were the aggressive, confident pilots who'd survived the elimination process that had claimed her. She wondered how many of them would still be alive in 10 years, and whether the Air Force would ever recognize that fast decisions weren't always the right decisions. Elena Rodriguez was leaving flight school branded as too cautious, too slow, and fundamentally unsuited for military aviation. But she was also leaving with a complete understanding of aircraft systems, weather patterns, and emergency procedures that would prove invaluable in ways that nobody could have predicted. Sometimes, the people who get kicked out of flight school are exactly the ones who end up saving everyone else when the impossible becomes inevitable. The transport aircraft carrying Elena to her new assignment climbed into the Texas sky, carrying with it a future air traffic controller who understood flying better than most pilots and who would spend the next decade proving that careful thinking and methodical analysis weren't weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be cultivated. But that recognition was still years away, and Elena Rodriguez had a lot of learning to do before she would find herself in the cockpit of a dying B-52, using exactly the kind of methodical approach that had gotten her kicked out of flight school. To save 6 lives and prevent a disaster that would have changed aviation history forever. The humid Mississippi air hung thick around Keesler Air Force Base as Elena Rodriguez stepped off the transport bus carrying her single duffel bag and her grandfather's leather flight journal. Around her, dozens of other airmen moved with purpose toward various training facilities, but Elena felt completely untethered from the world of military aviation she'd dreamed of joining. The 342nd Training Squadron occupied a cluster of beige buildings that looked more like a corporate office complex than the dynamic flight operations she'd left behind at Randolph. Elena's new dormitory room was smaller and more sterile than her previous quarters, with cinder block walls painted in regulation off-white and a single window that overlooked a parking lot rather than an active runway. Her roommate was Airman First Class Monica Barnes, a cheerful young woman from Oregon who'd enlisted straight out of high school and seemed genuinely excited about her upcoming air traffic control training. "You're going to love it here," Monica said as Elena unpacked her few belongings. "The instructors are really good, and the control tower training is supposed to be amazing. Plus, we get to work with actual aircraft instead of just simulations." Elena nodded politely, but the enthusiasm felt forced. She'd gone from training to pilot million-dollar fighters to learning how to guide other people's aircraft from the ground. The transition felt like being demoted from symphony conductor to ticket taker at the concert hall. The orientation briefing took place in Classroom Charlie, where 37 new air traffic control students gathered to learn about their upcoming training program. Master Sergeant Diana Walsh stood at the front of the room, her bearing reflecting 22 years of military service, and her expression suggesting someone who'd seen every type of student the Air Force could produce. "Ladies and gentlemen," Master Sergeant Walsh began, "you are here to learn one of the most critical specialties in military aviation. Air traffic controllers are responsible for the safe and efficient movement of aircraft in some of the world's most complex airspace. Your decisions will directly impact mission success and aircrew safety." She clicked through a series of slides showing various air traffic control facilities around the world, from small forward operating bases to massive international airports. "The training program is intensive and demanding. You'll learn radar operations, airport tower procedures, approach control techniques, and emergency response protocols. The washout rate is approximately 15%, primarily due to inability to manage multiple aircraft simultaneously under high-stress conditions." Elena listened carefully, taking notes in her flight journal while observing her fellow students. Most seemed eager and attentive, but she noticed a few who appeared less enthusiastic about their assignment. She wondered how many were here by choice versus reassignment from other programs. The technical aspects of air traffic control proved immediately fascinating to Elena. The integration of radar systems, radio communications, weather monitoring, and aircraft performance characteristics required exactly the kind of systematic thinking that had been discouraged in pilot training. Controllers needed to maintain awareness of multiple aircraft simultaneously, predict their future positions, and coordinate complex traffic patterns while accounting for weather, runway conditions, and aircraft limitations. During their first radar laboratory session, Elena found herself paired with Airman Barnes at a dual-position training console. The simulated airspace contained 6 aircraft at various altitudes and headings, with their instructor technical Sergeant James Rodriguez monitoring their progress from an observation station. "Barnes, you'll handle aircraft Alpha through Charlie," Sergeant Rodriguez instructed. "Rodriguez, you take Delta through Foxtrot. Remember, separation minimums are 3 miles horizontally or 1,000 feet vertically. Maintain constant communication and coordinate any conflicting traffic patterns." Elena immediately began tracking her assigned aircraft, noting their current positions, altitudes, and filed flight plans. She cross-referenced weather data, runway availability, and approach procedures to develop a mental picture of how traffic would flow over the next 30 minutes. Her approach was methodical and comprehensive, building a complete understanding of the airspace before making any control decisions. Airman Barnes, meanwhile, began issuing immediate heading and altitude changes to her aircraft, working to establish separation and sequence them for landing approaches. Her style was more reactive, responding to immediate conflicts as they developed rather than anticipating future problems. Sergeant Rodriguez observed after 10 minutes, "You're spending too much time analyzing and not enough time controlling. Those aircraft need immediate attention." Elena had identified 3 potential traffic conflicts that would develop over the next 15 minutes and was formulating a comprehensive solution that would resolve all issues simultaneously. But Sergeant Rodriguez wanted her to address the most immediate problem first, then deal with subsequent issues as they arose. "Roger, Sergeant," Elena replied, beginning to issue control instructions to her aircraft. Her solutions were elegant and efficient, routing traffic in smooth patterns that minimized course changes and altitude variations. But they required more planning time than the rapid-fire approach demonstrated by Airman Barnes. The pattern continued. Through their second week of training, Elena consistently demonstrated superior situational awareness, better understanding of aircraft performance characteristics, and more efficient traffic management solutions. But she was slower to respond to immediate problems, preferring to analyze the complete picture before making control decisions. Her first formal evaluation reflected this dichotomy. Airman Rodriguez demonstrates exceptional technical knowledge and superior traffic management skills, wrote Sergeant Rodriguez. However, her response time to developing traffic conflicts requires improvement. Recommend additional emphasis on rapid decision-making exercises. Elena read the familiar criticism with growing frustration. Once again, her careful approach was being characterized as a deficiency rather than a strength. The air traffic control community seemed to value quick reactions over thoughtful analysis, just like the pilot training program she'd left behind. But air traffic control also offered something pilot training hadn't: access to real aircraft operations and the opportunity to observe how different flying styles affected safety and efficiency. Elena spent her off-duty hours in the base control tower, watching experienced controllers manage actual traffic and learning from their techniques. What she observed reinforced her belief in methodical approaches to aviation. The most effective controllers weren't necessarily the fastest ones. They were the ones who anticipated problems before they developed, who understood aircraft capabilities thoroughly, and who maintained comprehensive awareness of weather, traffic, and airport conditions. The controllers who consistently made rapid decisions without adequate analysis were also the ones who created the most conflicts and generated the highest pilot workload. Elena began documenting these observations in her flight journal, recording specific examples of how different control techniques affected traffic flow and safety. She noted that controllers who took time to analyze complex situations before issuing instructions generated smoother traffic patterns and fewer pilot complaints. Conversely, controllers who issued rapid-fire instructions without adequate planning often created cascading problems that required increasingly frantic corrections. During her third week of training, Elena encountered her first real emergency situation. A T-38 trainer aircraft declared an emergency due to engine failure while approaching Keesler's runway. The student controller on duty immediately began issuing rapid instructions to clear traffic from the aircraft's approach path, but his hurried commands created confusion among other aircraft and nearly resulted in a secondary conflict. Elena watched from the observation area as experienced controllers took over the situation, their responses methodical and systematic. They cleared conflicting traffic with minimal course changes, coordinated with emergency response vehicles, and provided the distressed aircraft with clear, concise instructions that reduced pilot workload during a critical phase of flight. "That's how it's supposed to work," observed Master Sergeant Walsh, who joined Elena at the observation window. Emergency situations require calm, systematic responses, not panic reactions. The aircraft with the emergency isn't going anywhere fast, so controllers need to think through their solutions rather than just reacting. Elena nodded agreement, but privately wondered why this philosophy applied to emergency situations, but not to normal operations. If systematic thinking was valuable during emergencies, wouldn't it be equally valuable during routine traffic management? That evening, Elena documented the emergency response in her flight journal, noting how the experienced controller's methodical approach had resolved the situation efficiently while maintaining safety margins for all aircraft involved. She contrasted their performance with the student controller's rapid but poorly planned responses that had complicated rather than simplified the situation. Her observations were beginning to form a comprehensive picture of how aviation systems actually worked versus how training programs said they should work. The disconnect between training philosophy and operational reality suggested that the military's emphasis on speed might be creating problems rather than solving them. Elena's fourth week brought tower control training, where students learned to manage aircraft movements on airport runways and taxiways. This phase required visual observation skills combined with radio communication techniques and coordination with ground control, approach control, and various airport support services. The tower control simulator replicated Keesler's actual airport. Layout with remarkable fidelity, including realistic aircraft models, weather effects, and radio communications. Elena found herself managing a busy traffic pattern with multiple aircraft, requesting takeoff and landing clearances while coordinating with simulated emergency vehicles and maintenance personnel. Her systematic approach proved particularly valuable. In the tower environment, where controllers needed to maintain awareness of aircraft on final approach, in the traffic pattern on the runway, and taxiing to and from parking areas, Elena's careful observation skills allowed her to spot potential conflicts before they developed and coordinate solutions that maintain smooth traffic flow. Rodriguez observed Technical Sergeant Maria Gonzalez during a particularly complex traffic scenario. Your traffic management is excellent, but you need to increase your communication pace. Pilots expect rapid clearances, especially during busy periods. Elena had successfully managed 12 aircraft through various phases of airport operations without any safety conflicts or excessive delays. Her clearances were clear, complete, and well-timed, but delivered at a measured pace that some instructors considered too slow for high-volume operations. During the debrief session, Sergeant Gonzalez emphasized the importance of rapid communication in tower operations. Pilots are trained to expect immediate responses to their requests. Delays in issuing clearances can disrupt traffic flow and create unnecessary complications. Elena understood the logic but questioned whether rapid communication was always beneficial. She'd observed that hurried clearances often contained errors or omissions that required corrections, ultimately consuming more time than carefully constructed initial instructions. Her methodical communication style virtually eliminated the need for clarification or correction, suggesting that her approach might actually be more efficient in the long run. But efficiency wasn't the primary concern of her training supervisors. They wanted to see rapid responses that demonstrated her ability to function in high-tempo operational environments. Elena's careful approach, while technically superior, suggested someone who might struggle under pressure. The pattern of excellent performance combined with criticism for slow pace continued through Elena's 5th and 6th weeks of training. She consistently demonstrated superior technical knowledge, better situational awareness, and more effective problem-solving skills than her classmates. But her methodical approach remained a constant source of concern for instructors who valued speed over thoroughness. Elena's mid-course evaluation reflected this ongoing tension. Airman Rodriguez possesses exceptional technical skills and demonstrates superior understanding of air traffic control principles, wrote Master Sergeant Walsh. Her traffic management solutions are consistently effective and well-planned. However, her communication pace and decision-making speed fall below standards expected for high-volume operations. Recommend intensive remedial training focused on rapid response techniques. The evaluation stung because it ignored the quality of Elena's work while focusing entirely on the speed of her delivery. She was being judged not on the effectiveness of her solutions, but on how quickly she could articulate them. The emphasis on rapid response seemed to assume that fast was inherently better, regardless of accuracy or completeness. Elena's frustration deepened when she observed the performance of classmates who'd been praised for their rapid communication styles. Several had made significant errors that created safety conflicts or operational delays, but these mistakes were dismissed as natural learning experiences. Elena's error-free performance was somehow less valuable than her classmates' rapid but flawed responses. During a particularly difficult tower simulation in her 7th week, Elena's methodical approach prevented what could have been a serious incident. The scenario involved multiple aircraft requesting emergency priority, conflicting runway construction, and rapidly changing weather conditions. Most student controllers became overwhelmed by the complexity and began issuing hasty clearances. That created additional conflicts. Elena took time to analyze the complete situation before making any controlled decisions. She identified the most critical aircraft, developed a comprehensive traffic management plan, and coordinated with various support agencies to ensure safe resolution of all emergencies. Her response took longer to implement, but resolved all conflicts without creating additional problems. Rodriguez, observed Sergeant Gonzalez after the simulation, "Your solution was technically excellent, but you took too long to develop it." In actual emergency situations, pilots need immediate responses, not extended analysis. Elena respectfully disagreed, pointing out that her comprehensive solution had resolved all conflicts simultaneously, while rapid responses by other controllers had created cascading problems requiring multiple corrections. But her argument fell on deaf ears. The training philosophy remained committed to speed over analysis. That weekend, Elena called her grandfather to discuss her ongoing struggles with training expectations. His advice was characteristically thoughtful and supportive. "Mija," he said after listening to her concerns, "some organizations confuse motion with progress, noise with communication, and haste with competence. Your job isn't to change their minds. It's to be ready when they need someone who can actually solve problems." His words provided perspective that helped Elena maintain confidence in her approach, despite continued criticism from instructors. She wasn't trying to be difficult or challenging. She was simply applying the careful thinking that had always served her well in complex situations. Elena's 8th week brought approach control training, the most challenging phase of the air traffic control program. Approach controllers managed aircraft transitions between high-altitude en route airspace and airport terminal areas, requiring coordination with multiple facilities and precise management of complex traffic patterns. The approach control simulator presented students with realistic scenarios involving aircraft arriving from various directions at different altitudes and speeds, all requiring sequencing for landing approaches while maintaining safe separation from departing traffic. The complexity was enormous, with controllers managing up to 20 aircraft simultaneously while coordinating with tower controllers and route centers and various military facilities. Elena's systematic approach proved particularly valuable. In the approach control environment, her ability to maintain awareness of multiple aircraft positions, predict their future locations, and coordinate complex traffic patterns made her exceptionally effective at managing high-volume operations. She could visualize the entire traffic situation and develop comprehensive solutions that optimized efficiency while maintaining safety margins. But once again, her careful approach was criticized for being too slow. "Rodriguez," observed Major Patricia Coleman, the senior approach control instructor, "your traffic management skills are excellent, but your communication pace needs significant improvement." Approach controllers handle fast-moving situations that require immediate responses. Elena had successfully managed a complex arrival rush involving 18 aircraft with different performance characteristics, weather deviations, and spacing. Requirements. Her solution sequenced all traffic efficiently, while minimizing course changes and altitude variations. But she'd taken 30 seconds longer than the target time to coordinate the initial traffic management plan. During the debrief, Major Coleman emphasized the importance of rapid decision-making in approach control operations. Pilots flying high-performance aircraft expect immediate clearances and rapid traffic updates. Extended analysis time can disrupt carefully planned flight profiles and increase fuel consumption. Elena understood the concern, but questioned whether rapid responses that required multiple corrections were actually more efficient than careful initial planning. Her comprehensive approach virtually eliminated the need for subsequent changes, suggesting that her method might actually reduce pilot workload and improve operational efficiency. But the training cadre remained focused on communication speed rather than solution quality. Elena's methodical approach was consistently characterized as a liability rather than an asset, Despite her superior technical performance and problem-solving effectiveness, her final weeks at Keesler became increasingly difficult as instructors pressed her to adopt a more rapid communication style. Elena attempted to accommodate their expectations, but rushing her responses inevitably led to errors and omissions that required corrections. The forced speed degraded the quality of her work without producing the rapid responses that instructors demanded. Elena's graduation evaluation reflected the ongoing tension between her exceptional technical skills and her methodical communication style. Airman Rodriguez demonstrates superior understanding of air traffic control principles and exceptional problem-solving abilities, wrote Master Sergeant Walsh. However, her communication pace remains below standards for high-volume operations. Recommend assignment to low-density facilities, where her technical skills can be utilized effectively while minimizing exposure to high-tempo environments. The recommendation was essentially a career limitation disguised as a technical assessment. Elena was being classified as suitable only for quiet facilities, where her careful approach wouldn't be challenged by demanding operational requirements. She was graduating from Air Traffic Control School with excellent grades, but limited assignment options. Elena's first duty assignment was to Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, home to the 341st Missile Wing and a relatively low-activity airfield that primarily supported cargo operations and occasional fighter deployments. The assignment was exactly what her evaluation had recommended: a quiet facility where her methodical approach would be tolerated rather than valued. As Elena packed her belongings for the trip to Montana, she reflected on her experiences at Keesler. She'd mastered every aspect of air traffic control training, while consistently receiving criticism for her careful approach to complex problems. The pattern was identical to her pilot training experience: exceptional technical performance overshadowed by concerns about her decision-making speed. Monica Barnes tried to encourage her roommate as they prepared for their respective assignments. "Elena, you're going to be a great controller. Don't let the speed thing get to you. When things get really complicated, people will appreciate having someone who thinks things through." Elena appreciated the support, but she wondered if anyone would ever recognize the value of careful analysis in military aviation. The system seemed designed to reward rapid responses regardless of their quality, while penalizing thoughtful approaches regardless of their effectiveness. As her transport aircraft climbed away from Keesler Air Force Base, Elena looked down at the runways where she'd spent 3 months learning to guide other people's aircraft safely through complex airspace. She was leaving with comprehensive knowledge of air traffic control procedures and a complete understanding of how aviation systems integrated to support flight operations. But she was also leaving with a reputation as someone who was technically competent but operationally limited, suitable only for quiet assignments where her careful approach wouldn't interfere with the rapid-fire demands of modern military aviation. Elena Rodriguez was being exiled to a remote base in Montana, classified as too methodical for challenging assignments. What nobody realized was that Elena's systematic approach and comprehensive understanding of aviation systems would prove invaluable in ways that couldn't be predicted. Malmstrom Air Force Base was about to receive an air traffic controller who understood aircraft better than most pilots and who would spend the next several years proving that careful thinking was exactly what complex situations required. But that recognition was still years away, and Elena had more learning to do in the quiet skies over Montana before she would find herself guiding a crippled B-52 through the most challenging approach of her career, using exactly the kind of methodical analysis that had gotten her classified as too slow for demanding assignments. The winter wind across the Montana plains cut through Elena Rodriguez like a frozen blade as she stepped out of the base taxi at Malmstrom Air Force Base. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by the stark silhouettes of missile Silos scattered across the landscape like geometric monuments to Cold War tensions. The control tower rose from the center of the small airfield, a lonely sentinel watching over runways that saw perhaps a dozen aircraft movements on a busy day. Elena's new supervisor was Master Sergeant Kevin Thompson, a 20-year veteran, whose weathered face reflected 2 decades of Montana, winters and quiet shifts in one of the Air Force's most isolated facilities. He met Elena at the base operations building with the kind of resigned politeness reserved for personnel who'd been assigned rather than requested. "Rodriguez, welcome to Big Sky Country," Sergeant Thompson said, shaking Elena's hand with a grip that suggested genuine strength beneath his casual demeanor. "Hope you're ready for the slow life. We don't exactly run a high-tempo operation here." The comment carried an undertone that Elena recognized immediately. Her assignment to Malmstrom wasn't accidental. It was administrative exile for someone whose methodical approach had been deemed unsuitable for demanding facilities. Sergeant Thompson's greeting confirmed that her reputation had preceded her. Elena's initial briefing took place in the facility chief's office, where Chief Master Sergeant Angela Morrison outlined Malmstrom's unique operational requirements. The base supported nuclear missile operations, cargo movements, and occasional deployments of fighter aircraft for training exercises. Traffic volume was low, but the facilities demanded absolute precision because any errors could affect nuclear security operations. "Rodriguez," Chief Morrison explained, "your assignment here is straightforward. We need controllers who can handle routine operations without creating complications. Your technical background suggests you'll fit well with our requirements." The underlying message was clear. Malmstrom was where the Air Force sent controllers who were competent but not considered suitable for challenging assignments. Elena would be handling simple traffic patterns in a quiet environment where her careful approach wouldn't interfere with fast-paced operations. But Elena discovered something unexpected during her first week at Malmstrom. The base's quiet exterior concealed complex operational requirements that demanded exactly the kind of comprehensive thinking that had been discouraged at her previous assignments. Nuclear security protocols required controllers to coordinate with multiple agencies. Weather conditions in Montana created challenging operational environments, and the base's remote location meant that errors couldn't be easily corrected by nearby facilities. Elena's first shift in the Malmstrom control tower revealed the complexity hidden beneath the base's quiet reputation. Senior Airman Marcus Chen, her training supervisor, walked her through the facility's unique procedures, while managing the cargo aircraft approaching through deteriorating weather conditions. "The thing about Malmstrom," Chen explained while coordinating with approach control, "is that everything has to be perfect the first time. We don't have backup facilities nearby, and the security requirements mean we can't improvise solutions like controllers at other bases." Elena observed Chen's methodical approach to traffic management, noting how he verified every clearance, cross-checked weather data continuously, and maintained constant coordination with various support agencies. His style was careful and systematic, exactly the approach that had been criticized at her previous assignments. "Why is the operational philosophy different here?" Elena asked during a quiet period between aircraft movements. Chun smiled and gestured toward the missile fields visible through the tower windows. "Nuclear operations don't tolerate mistakes. Everything we do here gets scrutinized by multiple agencies, and any errors can have serious consequences. The Air Force finally figured out that careful controllers are exactly what this kind of environment requires." Elena realized that she'd been assigned to one of the few facilities where her methodical approach would be valued rather than criticized. Malmstrom's unique requirements demanded controllers who could think comprehensively, analyze complex situations, and execute procedures with absolute precision. Her careful style wasn't a liability here. It was exactly what the mission required. During her second week, Elena encountered her first weather emergency at Malmstrom. A severe winter storm developed rapidly across central Montana, creating conditions that challenged even experienced controllers. Visibility dropped to near zero, winds exceeded aircraft limitations, and ice accumulation threatened runway operations. Elena was working the evening shift when the storm intensified beyond forecast predictions. A C-130 cargo aircraft was approaching. Malmstrom with critically low fuel, having been diverted from its original destination due to runway closure. The crew needed to land immediately, but conditions were rapidly deteriorating beyond safe operational limits. Sergeant Thompson appeared in the tower cab as Elena coordinated with weather services and runway maintenance crews. The C-130 was 20 minutes out, fuel remaining was marginal, and the storm showed no signs of weakening. Standard procedures would normally require diverting the aircraft to an alternate airport, but the nearest suitable facility was beyond the crew's fuel reserves. "Rodriguez," Sergeant Thompson said quietly, "this is your call. What's your assessment?" Elena had been tracking the storm's development for the past hour, analyzing weather data and coordinating with meteorological services to understand the system's behavior. Her comprehensive analysis suggested a brief window of improved conditions that might allow the aircraft to land safely, but the timing would be critical. "Sergeant, I'm showing a temporary improvement in conditions beginning in approximately 12 minutes, Elena reported. "Wind will decrease to acceptable limits, visibility will improve to minimums, and runway conditions should be stable for about 8 minutes. Sergeant Thompson studied the weather displays, noting the marginal conditions and rapidly changing forecasts. "How confident are you in that assessment?" Elena consulted her detailed weather analysis, cross-referencing multiple data sources and atmospheric models. "Very confident, Sergeant. The storm system shows consistent patterns that indicate the improvement window will occur as predicted." The decision carried enormous responsibility. If Elena's assessment was wrong, the C-130 crew would attempt a landing in dangerous conditions that could result in a catastrophic accident. But if her analysis was correct, delaying the approach would force the aircraft to attempt an emergency landing at an unsuitable facility with insufficient fuel reserves. Elena coordinated with the C-130 crew, providing detailed weather updates and precise timing for the predicted improvement window. Her communication was methodical and comprehensive, ensuring the pilots understood exactly what conditions to expect and when the optimal approach window would occur. At exactly the time Elena had predicted, weather conditions improved dramatically. Wind decreased, visibility increased, and the C-130 executed a perfect approach and landing with fuel reserves barely sufficient for taxi operations. The crew's post-flight comments praised Elena's accurate weather analysis and precise timing. Coordination. Sergeant Thompson's evaluation of Elena's performance was unequivocally positive. Rodriguez demonstrated exceptional weather analysis capabilities and outstanding judgment under pressure. Her comprehensive approach to complex meteorological conditions prevented what could have been a serious emergency. For the first time in her military career, Elena's methodical approach had been recognized as a strength rather than criticized as a weakness. The emergency had required exactly the kind of comprehensive analysis that had been discouraged at her previous assignments. Word of Elena's weather expertise spread quickly through Malmstrom's small air traffic control community. Controllers began consulting her for complex weather analysis, and pilots specifically requested her assistance when approaching in challenging conditions. Her reputation shifted from someone who was too slow to someone who could be trusted with the most difficult situations. During her 4th month at Malmstrom, Elena encountered a situation that would define her reputation within the broader Air Force community. A formation of F-16 fighters was conducting training exercises when severe turbulence damaged one aircraft's flight control systems. The pilot could maintain basic control but couldn't execute normal landing procedures. Elena was working approach control when the emergency was declared. The damaged F-16 needed a straight-in approach with minimal maneuvering, but weather conditions included gusty crosswinds that would make control extremely difficult. The pilot was an experienced instructor, but the aircraft's degraded control systems meant that normal landing techniques wouldn't work. Elena immediately began analyzing the complete situation: aircraft performance limitations, pilot capabilities, runway conditions, weather patterns, and emergency response coordination. Her systematic approach identified several factors that other controllers had missed, including wind patterns that would provide brief periods of reduced turbulence. Viper 2-1, Elena transmitted to the distressed aircraft, unshowing. Wind conditions that will provide stable approach conditions in approximately 6 minutes. Recommend holding current position until improvement window develops. The pilot initially resisted the delay, preferring to attempt an immediate landing rather than continue flying a damaged aircraft. But Elena's detailed explanation of wind patterns and aircraft limitations convinced him that waiting for better conditions would significantly improve his chances of a successful landing. Elena coordinated with multiple agencies while tracking weather developments and calculating optimal approach timing. Her analysis indicated that a specific wind condition would create ideal approach conditions for exactly 4 minutes, providing the pilot with a narrow but viable landing window. When the predicted conditions materialized, Elena guided the F-16 through a perfect straight-in approach. The pilot maintained control throughout the landing roll and taxied clear of the runway without incident. His post-flight debrief specifically praised Elena's weather analysis and timing coordination as crucial factors in the successful emergency response. Major Patricia Scott, Malmstrom's operations officer, commended Elena's performance in her official evaluation. Airman Rodriguez demonstrated exceptional situational awareness and outstanding analytical capabilities during a complex aircraft emergency. Additionally, engines 3 and 5 are running rough with decreased power output. Elena immediately began coordinating with multiple agencies while maintaining communication with the distressed bomber. Her systematic approach ensured that emergency response vehicles, medical personnel, and maintenance teams would be positioned and ready for any contingency. But more importantly, she began analyzing the aircraft's specific limitations to determine what approach procedures would be possible given their degraded systems. Buff 07, understand multiple hydraulic failures, electrical problems, navigation system degraded, and engine issues. Confirm you have manual reversion for flight controls and backup instruments for approach guidance. Affirmative, Tower. We have manual reversion, but control authority is significantly reduced. Backup attitude indicator and airspeed are functioning, but we've lost primary flight displays and autopilot systems. This aircraft is requiring constant pilot input to maintain stable flight. Elena realized that the B-52 crew was essentially flying a massive aircraft with the control authority of a much smaller plane, while dealing with degraded instrumentation and unreliable engine power. Normal approach procedures would be impossible, and the crew would need every advantage she could provide to successfully reach the runway. Colonel Hayes appeared beside Elena's position as the emergency coordination intensified. Rodriguez, you're the most qualified controller we have for this situation. What do you need? Colonel, I need direct communication with weather services, immediate runway condition updates, and coordination authority for all emergency response agencies. This crew is going to need precision guidance through an approach that's going to test the limits of what's possible. Elena's analysis of weather conditions revealed a complex pattern of wind shear, turbulence, and visibility restrictions that would challenge even a fully functional aircraft. The storm system was creating atmospheric conditions that would require constant course and altitude adjustments, exactly the kind of maneuvering that the damaged B-52 could least afford. Buff 07, I'm coordinating detailed weather analysis for your approach. Current conditions show wind from 270 at 25 gusting to 40, visibility 3 miles and snow, ceiling 1500 broken. However, I'm tracking improvement windows that may provide better approach conditions. Roger Tower, we'd appreciate any help you can provide. This aircraft is becoming increasingly difficult to control, and we're going to need optimal conditions for any chance of a successful approach. Elena began the most comprehensive weather analysis of her career, coordinating with meteorological services to understand every aspect of the storm system affecting Malmstrom. Her methodical approach identified patterns in wind direction, atmospheric pressure, and precipitation intensity that would create brief windows of improved conditions. But the B-52 situation continued to deteriorate as additional system failures occurred during their approach. Elena monitored their progress on radar while coordinating with maintenance personnel, who were analyzing the aircraft's technical problems and providing guidance to the flight crew. Tower, Buff 07. We're showing additional hydraulic pressure loss, and engine 5 is now indicating over-temperature conditions. We may need to shut down that engine if conditions continue to worsen. Elena realized that the crew was facing a cascade of failures that would soon leave them with minimal control authority and reduced power. Her analysis needed to account for continuously changing aircraft capabilities while coordinating an approach through challenging weather conditions. Buff 07, roger your additional difficulties. I'm coordinating with maintenance for engine shutdown procedures if required. Continue present heading and altitude while I finalize approach. Planning. Elena's systematic analysis revealed that conventional instrument approach procedures would be inappropriate for the B-52's degraded condition. The crew needed a modified approach that minimized maneuvering requirements while providing maximum flexibility for course corrections. Her solution required coordination with multiple air traffic control facilities and modification of standard procedures. Buff 07, I'm developing a modified straight-in approach that will minimize your maneuvering requirements. The approach will be longer than standard, but will provide more stable flight path with reduced control inputs required. Tower, that sounds excellent. We're struggling to maintain precise control, so anything that reduces maneuvering requirements would be greatly appreciated. Elena coordinated with approach control and center facilities to clear airspace for the B-52's extended approach path. Her comprehensive planning ensured that no other aircraft would conflict with the bomber's modified routing while providing maximum flexibility for course adjustments as conditions required. But Elena's most critical analysis focused on timing the approach to coincide with optimal weather conditions. Her detailed study of atmospheric patterns revealed a brief window when wind conditions would be most favorable for the damaged aircraft's landing attempt. Buff 07, based on detailed weather analysis, I recommend commencing your approach in approximately 8 minutes. This timing will provide optimal wind conditions and improved visibility for your landing attempt. Roger Tower, we're ready to begin approach when you clear us. Current aircraft condition is stable, but requiring constant attention to maintain control. Elena began coordinating the most complex emergency approach sequence of her career. Emergency response vehicles positioned along the runway, medical personnel prepared for potential casualties, and fire rescue teams readied equipment for possible crash response. But her primary focus remained on guiding the bomber through an approach that demanded precision coordination between air traffic control and the struggling flight crew. Buff 07, cleared for modified straight-in approach runway 09. Her comprehensive approach to weather analysis and precise timing coordination directly contributed to successful resolution of a potentially serious incident. Elena's reputation within the Montana Air National Guard and Regional Air Force community continued to grow as word spread about her weather expertise and analytical capabilities. Pilots began requesting her assistance for complex approaches, and other controllers sought her guidance when dealing with challenging meteorological conditions. But Elena's most significant professional development came through her relationship with Lieutenant Colonel Barbara Hayes, a former B-52 pilot who'd been assigned to Malmstrom as the Missile Wing's operations director. Colonel Hayes had extensive experience flying strategic bombers in all weather conditions and immediately recognized Elena's exceptional understanding of atmospheric conditions and aircraft performance characteristics. Rodriguez, Colonel Hayes, said during one of their informal conversations about weather patterns, "You analyze atmospheric conditions better than most meteorologists and understand aircraft limitations better than many pilots. Have you ever considered expanding your expertise into complex aircraft systems?" The suggestion intrigued Elena because it represented an opportunity to combine her aviation knowledge with her methodical analytical approach. Colonel Hayes arranged for Elena to receive additional training in aircraft systems analysis and emergency response coordination, recognizing that her unique combination of skills could prove valuable in complex operational scenarios. Elena's expanded training included comprehensive study of large aircraft systems, emergency procedures for various aircraft types, and coordination techniques for complex multi-agency responses. The training was demanding and detailed, requiring exactly the kind of systematic thinking that had characterized Elena's approach throughout her career. During her 8th month at Malmstrom, Elena faced her most challenging test yet. A severe winter storm system developed across the northern Rocky Mountains, creating conditions that threatened aircraft operations across a wide geographic area. Multiple facilities reported aircraft diversions, emergency declarations, and operational disruptions as the storm intensified beyond forecast predictions. Elena was working the midnight shift when Malmstrom received notification that a B-52 Stratofortress with mechanical problems was requesting emergency landing clearance. The bomber was returning from a training mission when multiple system failures left the crew with limited control authority and degraded navigation capabilities. Weather conditions were rapidly deteriorating, and the aircraft's fuel state was becoming critical. The B-52 crew was dealing with hydraulic system failures that affected flight controls, electrical problems that compromised navigation systems, and engine issues that reduced power availability. Normal emergency procedures weren't applicable because multiple systems were failing simultaneously. The crew needed a controller who could understand their complex situation and provide comprehensive support throughout their approach. Elena immediately began coordinating with multiple agencies, weather services for detailed atmospheric analysis, maintenance crews for emergency response preparation, medical personnel for potential casualty support, and fire services for crash rescue operations. Her systematic approach ensured that all required resources would be available and properly coordinated. But the B-52's situation continued to deteriorate as additional system failures occurred during their approach to Malmstrom. Elena found herself managing an increasingly complex emergency that required real-time analysis of aircraft performance limitations, weather conditions, and operational constraints. The crew's survival depended on her ability to guide them through an approach that was rapidly becoming impossible under normal procedures. Elena's methodical approach proved invaluable as she analyzed each new development and coordinated appropriate responses. Her comprehensive understanding of aircraft systems allowed her to anticipate the crew's needs and provide guidance that accounted for their degraded capabilities. Her weather analysis identified brief windows of improved conditions that gave the crew additional options for their approach. Colonel Hayes appeared in the control tower as the emergency intensified, recognizing that Elena's unique combination of skills made her the best qualified person to handle the complex situation. "Rodriguez, you have control of this emergency. Coordinate whatever resources you need and use whatever procedures you think are appropriate. Elena's response to the B-52 emergency would demonstrate whether her methodical approach could handle the most demanding situation military aviation could present. The bomber was running out of options. Weather conditions were approaching limits that would make any approach extremely dangerous, and multiple system failures meant that standard procedures were no longer applicable. As Elena coordinated with the struggling B-52 crew, she realized that this emergency represented everything her career had been preparing her for. Her comprehensive understanding of aircraft systems, weather patterns, and emergency procedures would be tested in a situation where rapid decisions based on incomplete information could prove fatal. The bomber was 15 minutes out from Malmstrom, struggling through deteriorating weather with failing systems and critically low fuel. Elena's analysis would determine whether 6 aircrew members lived or died, and her methodical approach would either prove its value or be exposed as inadequate for the demands of real-world emergencies. Everything Elena had learned about aviation, everything she'd observed about the disconnect between training philosophy and operational reality, and everything she believed about the value of careful analysis was about to be tested in the most demanding circumstances military aviation could provide. The B-52 crew was depending on a controller who'd been kicked out of pilot training for being too slow and reassigned to air traffic control for being too methodical. But Elena Rodriguez was about to prove that sometimes the most important quality in aviation wasn't speed or aggression. It was the ability to think clearly when everyone else was losing their heads. The next few minutes would determine whether Elena's careful approach could save 6 lives and prevent a disaster that would change military aviation forever. As she coordinated resources and analyzed the bomber's desperate situation, Elena realized that her entire career had been preparation for this moment when methodical thinking would prove more valuable than rapid reactions. The radio crackled. With the B-52 crew's increasingly urgent transmissions, as they struggled to maintain control of their damaged aircraft, Elena took a deep breath, opened her weather analysis display, and began the most important air traffic control sequence of her career. The bomber was depending on her, and she wouldn't let them down. Malmstrom Tower, this is Buff 07 declaring emergency. Multiple system failures, hydraulics degraded, electrical issues compromising navigation. Requesting immediate clearance for emergency approach. The voice of Major Robert Chun, aircraft commander of the B-52 Stratofortress, carried the controlled tension of a veteran pilot facing the worst situation of his career. Elena Rodriguez adjusted her headset and opened her comprehensive weather analysis display, knowing that the next 30 minutes would test everything she'd learned about aviation. During her journey from failed pilot candidate to expert air traffic controller. Buff 07, Malmstrom Tower, roger your emergency. Squawk emergency transponder code. State your position, altitude, fuel remaining, and nature of difficulties. Elena's voice was calm and methodical as she began gathering the information necessary to coordinate what was rapidly becoming the most complex emergency response in Malmstrom's history. Through the tower windows, she could see snow swirling across the runway in patterns that indicated wind conditions at the edge of operational limits. Tower, Buff 07 is 15 miles northwest, descending through flight level 200. Approximately 2 hours fuel remaining. We have hydraulic system Alpha and Charlie both showing failures. Backup electrical system is intermittent, and we've lost primary navigation displays. Maintain present altitude until intercepting final approach course, then begin gradual descent as coordinated. Weather shows wind 270 at 22 gusting to 35. Visibility improving to 5 miles. Cleared for approach. Runway 09. Beginning turn to final approach course. Elena monitored the B-52's progress on radar while maintaining communication with weather services and emergency response agencies. The bomber's course changes were gradual and deliberate, reflecting the crew's struggle to maintain control. while executing the modified approach procedure. Tower, Buff 07 on final approach course, beginning descent. Controls are heavy but manageable. Request continuous weather updates throughout approach. Buff 07 Roger. Wind now 270 at 18 gusting to 28, visibility 6 miles and improving. You're looking good on course and glide path. Elena's weather analysis had accurately predicted the improvement window, providing the bomber crew with more favorable conditions than had existed when they began their emergency approach. But the aircraft's degraded systems meant that even improved weather would challenge their ability to maintain precise control. Tower, we're experiencing control difficulties during descent. Aircraft is requiring significant pilot input to maintain stable approach profile. Elena realized that the crew was nearing the limits of their ability to control the damaged bomber. Her guidance would need to account for their reduced control authority, while providing maximum assistance for their landing attempt. Buff 07, understand control difficulties. You have clear runway with all emergency equipment standing by. Take whatever approach profile you can maintain safely. Emergency crews are prepared for any condition upon landing. Roger, Tower. We're going to continue this approach. Aircraft is controllable, but demanding constant attention. Elena coordinated with emergency response teams while monitoring the bomber's descent toward Malmstrom's runway. The aircraft's approach was stable but irregular, reflecting the crew's struggle to maintain control with degraded hydraulic systems and reduced engine power. Buff 07, you're 2 miles from runway threshold, on course and glide path. Wind 260 at 15 gusting to 25. Emergency equipment is in position. Tower, we have visual contact with runway. Controls are getting heavier as we descend, but we think we can make it. Elena watched through the tower windows as the massive bomber emerged from the snow squalls, its approach angle slightly steep but stable. The aircraft's landing lights cut through the precipitation as the crew fought to maintain control during the final phase of their emergency approach. Buff 07, looking good. You're 1 mile from threshold, slightly high on glide path, but well within acceptable parameters. Roger, Tower. We're going to get this aircraft on the ground. Thanks for all your assistance getting us this far. Elena held her breath as the B-52 crossed the runway threshold, its huge form settling toward the pavement with deliberate precision. The crew's skill and determination had brought them through the most challenging approach of their careers. But the landing phase would test their ability to maintain control during rollout. The bomber touched down firmly but smoothly, its main landing gear making contact with the runway in a cloud of snow and spray. Elena watched as the aircraft continued down the runway, its crew applying brakes and reverse thrust to slow the massive machine. Tower, Buff 07 is down and rolling. Aircraft control is good. We're going to clear the runway under our own power. Buff 07, outstanding job. Taxi clear of the runway when able. Emergency equipment will follow you to parking area for precautionary inspection. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction as she watched the bomber taxi clear of the runway, its crew having successfully completed one of the most challenging emergency approaches in military aviation history. Her methodical analysis and comprehensive coordination had provided the crew with optimal conditions and maximum support for their landing attempt. Colonel Hayes appeared at Elena's position as the emergency response concluded. Rodriguez, that was exceptional work. Your weather analysis, approach planning, and emergency coordination were flawless. The crew specifically requested to thank you personally for your assistance. 20 minutes later, Major Chun and his 5 crew members appeared in the control tower to express their appreciation for Elena's support during their emergency. Their faces reflected the exhaustion and relief of aviators who'd survived a situation that could easily have been fatal. Controller, Major Chun said, addressing Elena directly, your guidance saved our lives tonight. The modified approach procedure, weather analysis, and timing coordination gave us exactly what we needed to get this aircraft on the ground safely. We can't thank you enough." Elena accepted their gratitude with the quiet satisfaction of someone whose careful approach had finally been recognized for its true value. Her methodical analysis and comprehensive coordination had proven essential when rapid decisions and aggressive responses would have been inadequate. Word of Elena's performance during the B-52 emergency spread rapidly through Air Force air traffic control and pilot communities. Her innovative approach procedures, weather analysis capabilities, and emergency coordination skills became subjects of study at training facilities throughout the military aviation system. 6 months after the emergency, Elena received notification of her selection for promotion to Staff Sergeant and assignment as Malmstrom's Chief Air Traffic Controller. The promotion recognized not just her technical expertise, but her demonstrated ability to handle the most challenging situations military aviation could present. But the most meaningful recognition came in the form of a personal letter from General Patricia Williams, Commander of Air Mobility Command, acknowledging Elena's contribution to aviation safety and requesting her participation in developing new emergency response procedures for military air traffic controllers. Sergeant Rodriguez, General Williams wrote, "Your performance during the B-52 emergency at Malmstrom demonstrates the value of methodical analysis and comprehensive coordination in complex aviation situations. The Air Force needs controllers who can think systematically under pressure, and your expertise would be valuable in training future generations of air traffic control personnel." Elena's assignment to the Air Force's Advanced Air Traffic Control training program represented the complete transformation of her military career. The same methodical approach that had gotten her eliminated from pilot training and criticized during controller training was now being recognized as exactly what the aviation system needed. 2 years later, Elena stood before a classroom of student air traffic controllers at the Air Force's premier training facility, teaching the integration of weather analysis, aircraft systems knowledge, and emergency coordination techniques. Her curriculum emphasized systematic thinking, comprehensive analysis, and the value of careful preparation over rapid reaction. The goal of air traffic control, Elena told her students, isn't to make quick decisions. It's to make correct decisions. Sometimes those decisions need to be made rapidly, but speed without accuracy is just expensive noise. She clicked to a slide showing weather patterns around an airport approach. Your job is to understand every factor that affects aircraft operations, weather, aircraft performance, pilot capabilities, airport conditions, and emergency procedures. When you understand these elements comprehensively, your decisions will be both fast and correct. Elena's teaching philosophy reflected everything she'd learned during her journey from failed pilot candidate to expert controller. The aviation system needed people who could think systematically under pressure, who valued accuracy over speed, and who understood that comprehensive analysis prevented emergencies rather than simply responding to them. During breaks in her teaching schedule, Elena often reflected on the path that had brought her from the humiliation of elimination from pilot training to recognition as one of the Air Force's premier air traffic control experts. Her methodical approach hadn't changed, but the military's appreciation for that approach had evolved. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while Elena was reviewing lesson plans for her advanced weather analysis course. Colonel Hayes, now stationed at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, was requesting Elena's assistance with a complex operational challenge involving weather analysis and emergency response coordination. "Rodriguez," Colonel Hayes said, "we have a situation developing here that requires exactly your kind of expertise. I know you're focused on training now, but this could be an opportunity to apply your methods on a larger scale." The assignment would take Elena back to operational air traffic control, but at one of the Air Force's most demanding facilities. Peterson supported space operations, fighter deployments, and complex weather research activities that required the most sophisticated air traffic control capabilities in the military. Elena accepted the assignment, recognizing it as an opportunity to prove that her methodical approach could handle the most challenging operational environment the Air Force could provide. Her reputation had evolved from someone who was too slow for demanding assignments to someone who was specifically requested for the most complex situations. 6 months later, Elena Rodriguez stood in the approach control facility at Peterson Air Force Base, managing traffic for multiple aircraft types in complex weather conditions, while coordinating with space operations and research activities. Her systematic approach and comprehensive analysis had found their perfect application in an environment that demanded both precision and flexibility. The journey from failed pilot candidate to expert air traffic controller had taught Elena that success wasn't about conforming to other people's expectations of how things should be done. It was about understanding your own capabilities, developing those capabilities systematically, and finding the environment where those capabilities would be most valued. Elena's methodical approach to aviation had never changed, but the Air Force's understanding of when that approach was most valuable had evolved significantly. The same careful thinking that had been criticized as too slow during pilot training was now recognized as essential for handling complex operational challenges. During quiet periods in the Peterson Approach Control Facility, Elena often thought about the pilots and controllers she was training, wondering if any of them were struggling with the same disconnect between their natural approaches and institutional expectations that had characterized her own early career. Her advice to struggling students was always the same: develop your capabilities systematically, understand your strengths thoroughly, and never compromise your fundamental approach to achieve artificial speed. The aviation system needed people who could think clearly under pressure, and that kind of thinking couldn't be rushed. Elena Rodriguez had proven that sometimes the people who get kicked out of flight school for being too careful are exactly the ones who end up saving everyone else when careful thinking becomes the most important skill in aviation. Her methodical approach hadn't been a weakness to be overcome. It had been a strength to be developed and applied where it would be most valuable. The B-52 emergency at Malmstrom had been the moment when Elena's comprehensive approach proved its worth. But her real achievement was building a career that valued systematic thinking over rapid reaction. She'd found her place in military aviation not by changing who she was, but by proving that who she was had always been exactly what the system needed. As Elena guided another complex traffic pattern through challenging weather conditions at Peterson, she smiled quietly and continued doing what she'd always done best: thinking carefully, analyzing comprehensively, and proving that the most important decisions in aviation were the ones made with patience, precision, and understanding. The Air Force had finally learned what Elena's grandfather had taught her years earlier in that garage in Albuquerque. Flying wasn't about speed, it was about understanding. And understanding, Elena had proven, was worth any amount of time it took to develop properly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.